What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. So it seems the SNP MP Joanna Cherry and an activist, among others, are planning on taking Boris Johnson to court once again in the hopes that they can get him jailed if he refuses to obey the Ben Bill, or Surrender Act as it's more commonly known, which effectively forces Boris Johnson to ask for an extension against his will. They are trying to get him put in prison if he doesn't comply with that order. Now, the BBC, among others, are reporting on this morning, and the article headlines, "Court to consider if PM can be jailed over a no-deal Brexit." Which I will preface this video on saying, no, he can't, because it's in Article 50, which is EU law, supersedes UK law. So, yeah, he ain't going to be jailed, but we'll read through the article and see what it has to say. A Scottish judge is being asked to consider whether Boris Johnson could be jailed if he takes the UK out of the EU without a deal. A legal challenge is to be heard at the Court of Session about whether the Prime Minister could be forced to delay Brexit if no deal is agreed. As some of you might remember, the Court of Session is the court that found that Boris Johnson had acted unlawfully and caused the Supreme Court to side with it, I would suggest, because they had to decide to side with one. If the Court of Session would have rejected that case, then I'm sure the Supreme Court would have rejected it also. But as it stands, they didn't. The Court of Session started it where they involved themselves in politics, and the Supreme Court followed suit. However, Mr Johnson has said he would rather be dead in a ditch than ask European leaders for another extension. The court case seeks to establish what might happen if he refuses to act. This could even include the court effectively signing a letter to European leaders on behalf of Mr Johnson, asking for a fresh extension. Now, that is more likely to occur than Boris being arrested for it, because EU law supersedes it and says that no deal is one of the options available to the UK and to the EU. The UK government has insisted it is focused on sealing a deal with the EU to ensure the UK can leave by the 31st of October, which is the current deadline, but says a no-deal exit is the only other alternative, which of course it is. It's the preferred alternative if you ask me and many other people. The legal action has been initiated by businessman Dale Vince, QC Joe Morgan and SNP MP Joanna Cherry. Like I said earlier, she's always got her fucking nose involved, ain't she? They want the Court of Session to rule on the extent to which Mr Johnson is bound by the legislation passed by opposition MPs, the Ben Act, which requires the government to request an extension to the Brexit deadline if a deal has not been signed off by Parliament by 19th of October. In other words, the reason why she is doing this is she wants to know what legal routes the government has out of it, because they can't find out themselves and Boris and the rest of them are not telling them. They're trying to find out what it is Boris hopes to use to get out of it so that they can then do something to stop that. But they're going to have to change EU law, which means they would have to speak to the EU to prevent Brexit happening, and that would mean literally colluding with a foreign power to prevent something that the voters have actually asked for, and that the government and other parties have agreed to provide. Lord Pentland will hear arguments on Friday about what the consequences of the Prime Minister not doing this would be, with the petitioners suggesting penalties including fine and imprisonment could be applicable. No, it won't. This is nonsense. They're not going to put him in prison because EU law supersedes UK law, as I've already said, and that will prevent him being put in prison because he's following EU law. The Supreme Court is going to have a hard time getting around that, although nothing is beyond the realm of possibilities in 2019, so don't think that everything's safe and well, because it could well not be. Who knows? Precedent has been broken multiple times just in the last few weeks. The judge will rule on this initial part of the case on Monday, after which a panel of inner house judges will consider whether the court could use its noble officium power to effectively sign a letter to the European leaders if Mr Johnson refuses to do so. Mr Johnson has continued to insist that the UK will leave the EU by October the 31st and has said he would rather be dead in a ditch than request a fresh delay. He has repeatedly referred to the Ben Act as a surrender bill, saying it would take away the power of this government and the power of this country to decide how long it remained in the EU and give that power to the EU. And he said on Wednesday there was no doubt the only alternative to the fresh exit proposals his government has drawn up was to leave without a deal. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, meanwhile, has suggested the government would adhere to the law, but would want to test to the limit what it actually lawfully requires. Prior to the hearing in Edinburgh, Miss Cherry said Mr Johnson cannot be trusted and the court action was about ensuring he abides by the law. She said if Boris Johnson tries to defy the law and defy both the Holyrood and Westminster Parliaments by crashing out of the EU without a deal, then we are calling on the Scottish courts to uphold the law. Last week, the UK Supreme Court unanimously ruled that Boris Johnson's attempt to shut down Parliament was unlawful, void and of no effect. He must be reminded that he is not above the law. And no, Joanna Cherry, this is nothing to do with ensuring he abides by the law. This is because you're worried he's going to take us out of the EU and there's nothing you can do about it at the end of the day. This is why. You don't know what plans he has to take us out of the EU without a deal if necessary and get round the Surrender Act. And you don't like it. The same as Grieve and Philip Hammond and all the rest of them. None of yous like it, Swinson, Corbyn. You're all the same. You're all sitting there shitting your pants when it comes down to it because you know Boris has ways, possibly, that he can get us out and around your surrender bill. That is the whole reason behind this court case. I'm telling you now, it's going to be so they can find out what options he has to get round it because they can't figure them out, obviously. They lack the legal knowledge, which is amazing considering they've won cases, but who knows how they manage to win these cases when they conflict with every precedent ever set. But as I've said many times, EU law will supersede it, so at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the Ben bill has in it, unless they can make some motions that can change that. But I'm not sure how they would, or if they can, because there's no precedent for anything these people are doing these days, let's be honest. But guys, I'm going to end the video there. I want to thank the channel's PayPal, Patreon and Subscribe Star members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Remember to let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Leave a like, subscribe with the notification bell and share this video as it helps the channel a lot. And I will see you all in the next one.
This Parliament is a dead Parliament. It should no longer sit. It has no moral right to sit on these green benches. They don't like the truth. Twice they have been asked to let the electorate decide upon whether they should continue to sit in their seats, while they block 17.4 million people's votes. This Parliament is a disgrace, but they're too cowardly to give it a go. But the time is coming. The time is coming, Mr. Speaker, when even these turkeys won't be able to prevent Christmas.